Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. On the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, the world is not only paying attention to China's latest display of advanced weaponry, but also to the foreign heads of state in attendance who have become the focus of global diplomatic circles. Among them, the ones attracting the most attention are, of course, Russian President Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The leaders of China, North Korea, and Russia stood in the center during the group photo, and together, in a harmonious atmosphere, ascended the Tiananmen Gate side by side. Afterwards, Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Putin, and Kim Jong-un appeared on the gate one after another, creating a historic moment where the heads of state of the three countries stood together. According to foreign media reports, this is the first time since the end of the Cold War that the leaders of China, North Korea, and Russia have gathered together in an official setting. The last such occasion dates back to the era of the former Soviet Union in 1959, when then Chinese leader Mao Zedong, Soviet Communist Party General Secretary Khrushchev, and North Korean leader Kim Il-sung ascended the Tiananmen Gate together to observe the military parade marking the 10th anniversary of China's National Day. Including Russia and North Korea, a total of 26 foreign heads of state and government leaders were invited to attend the 80th anniversary commemorative event. These included King Norodom Sihamoni of Cambodia, Vietnamese President Tu Lam, General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Lao People's Revolutionary Party, and President Thongloun Sisoulith, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, Mongolian President Khurelsuke Ukhnaa, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Nepalese Prime Minister Oli, as well as Maldivian President Muizu. The presidents of the Central Asian countries Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan were also present. In addition, Belarusian President Lukashenko, the President of Azerbaijan, and the Prime Minister of Armenia, as well as Iranian President Pezeshkian, were also in attendance. From Africa, there were President Sassou of the Republic of the Congo and President Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe. From Europe, there was Serbian President Vučić, Slovak Prime Minister Fico, as well as the first secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba and President Diaz-Canel from Latin America, and Myanmar's President Min Aung Hlaing. The BBC published a lengthy article analyzing what kind of brand new global landscape the September 3rd military parade would bring. The headline asked, with the SCO summit following closely after the parade, is the China-led anti-American alliance entering a new era? Let's first take a look at this BBC article. The article points out right at the beginning that US President Trump is neither the leader of a member state of the SCO nor an invited guest at the September 3rd military parade. The article says that most of Xi Jinping's guests are either under US sanctions or are at odds with the US due to the trade war. The analysts interviewed by the BBC generally believe that the combination of the SCO summit and the anti-Japanese war military parade is undoubtedly a grand diplomatic event for Xi Jinping to showcase the strength of his anti-American alliance. On September 1st, at the SCO's expanded meeting, President Xi announced the launch of a global governance initiative proposing 5 key principles: upholding sovereign equality, adhering to international law, practicing multilateralism, advocating a people-centered approach, and focusing on action-oriented outcomes. The BBC described these principles as including the promotion of democratization in international relations, enhancing the representation and voice of developing countries, opposing double standards, and not imposing the domestic rules of a few countries on others. Wadi Ning, a visiting professor at Georgetown University's Asia program, said that Xi Jinping has never shied away from pointing out that the US-led international order needs to be revised. Wadi Ning said that as the SCO summit convenes, it coincides with President Trump questioning the fundamental principles of free trade and the international liberal order. This presents China with an excellent opportunity to emphasize itself as a reliable force countering Trump's unpredictability and America First policies. The BBC article also interviewed Susan Thornton, the retired US Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. She analyzed for the BBC that, to some extent, this indeed symbolizes the emergence of a certain alignment or alliance. She said that the countries participating in the SCO summit and the Beijing military parade harbor dissatisfaction with Western unilateral or hegemonic actions. Now they have made their stance clear, expressing opposition and hoping for changes in the global order that better align with their own interests. Henry Levine is a senior fellow at the Freeman Chair in China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. He has previously played an active role in formulating Indo-Pacific, especially China-related policies at both the White House and the U.S. State Department. He believes that Beijing hopes to weaken U.S. leadership and the rules-based international order, and to replace it with a new system that better accommodates China's authoritarian political system and its interests, as well as to supplant existing positions on Taiwan and the South China Sea. Holding the SCO summit and the military parade commemorating the victory in the war of resistance against Japan, two seemingly unrelated major international events, back to back. Professor Steve Tsang, director of the China Institute at SARS University of London, described China's approach as very shrewd. He said that while the world is currently troubled by Trump's erratic tariff policies, China holds the cards to send a signal of stability to the Global South countries, who are also its partners in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. China is demonstrating its stable strength in political cooperation and development. Meanwhile, the actions of the United States are quite the opposite. On the eve of the military parade, the Chinese authorities also held several press conferences. At the press conference on August 29th, Vice Foreign Minister Ma Jiaoshu stated that the international community generally believes that the concept of building a community with a shared future for mankind transcends selfishness and protectionism, breaks the hegemonic mindset of certain countries that put themselves above all others, reflects China's unique perspective on the direction of human development, and is of great significance for promoting unity and cooperation among nations and creating a better future for humanity together. Ma Jiaoshu said that many international figures have remarked that the concept of a community with a shared future for mankind represents the voice of the international community and brings peace, development, and hope to the world. The BBC pointed out that at the recently concluded Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, the term community with a shared future was frequently mentioned, and not necessarily only by Chinese officials. According to reports in Pakistani newspapers, their prime minister stated at the summit that Pakistan and China share a common destiny, and that all the initiatives of his government are highly consistent with President Xi's vision and philosophy. Levin, a senior fellow at the US-based CSIS, believes that although the specific directions for implementing these concepts have yet to be clarified, he thinks that Beijing has already succeeded in securing at least verbal support from the majority of countries for at least one of its grand initiatives. Meanwhile, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Xi Jinping announced the launch of a new global initiative, this time focusing on governance, highlighting his continued commitment to reshaping the world order. Former U.S. official Susan Thornton believes that Xi Jinping gathering multiple national leaders in Tianjin and Beijing is seen by Trump as another sign of Xi's influence and presence on the global stage. The article suggests that Trump is very eager to meet Xi Jinping in person, and now he is even more anxious for the meeting to happen as soon as possible. At the same time, Trump also hopes that Xi Jinping can put pressure on Russia regarding a ceasefire in Ukraine. Simultaneously, Trump is also very keen to hold another summit with Kim Jong-un to promote changes in the situation on the Korean Peninsula and in U.S.-North Korea relations. Meanwhile, Trump is also paying close attention to Xi Jinping's interactions with both Putin and Kim Jong-un. To briefly summarize, the BBC article makes several observations. First, while the article naturally views China through a biased lens, it does provide a relatively comprehensive explanation of an important phenomenon. A brand new world order has already begun, and the era of American dominance is over. China is now able to stand on equal footing with the United States in terms of politics, economics, and military strength. Second, the arguments presented in this BBC article are ones that most Chinese people would not agree with. It's not that China is trying to form an anti-American alliance, rather it's the United States that is trying to suppress China. China is not seeking to oppose the US. Instead, China is countering America's unreasonable suppression. The foreign dignitaries attending the conference are also here to express their support for China's efforts to counter U.S. hegemony. Third, this BBC article also repeats some common Western narratives, such as claiming that China is trying to unite so-called authoritarian countries to undermine the existing international order. I believe that most Chinese people do not agree with this viewpoint either. On the contrary, what China seeks to uphold is precisely the fair and just international system centered around the United Nations established after World War II. If the West considers American hegemony and bullying to be the so-called international order, why shouldn't China oppose it? In fact, we should oppose it loudly and clearly. In conclusion, the September 3rd military parade demonstrated that China possesses both military strength and diplomatic influence and is willing to say no to American hegemony. However, it must be emphasized that showcasing advanced weaponry and hard power is not about invading others, but about safeguarding our own sovereignty and having enough strength to say no to forces that seek to contain China's peaceful rise. In addition, another important signal from this parade is that Indonesia has become one of the main focuses of attention. On the evening of September 2nd, Indonesian President Prabowo, who had previously apologized to the Chinese side for being unable to attend the September 3rd parade due to domestic unrest, suddenly boarded a special plane and made a special trip to Beijing. Given that the distance from Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, to Beijing is over 7,000 kilometers, even the fastest flight takes more than 7 hours. At 74 years old, Prabowo truly traveled day and night, determined to attend the September 3rd parade. Some political commentators from the mainland have pointed out that the reason Prabowo dared to make such a high-profile appearance was clearly to express his stance and sincerity. So as soon as the domestic situation improved slightly, he immediately set off for Beijing to keep his appointment, demonstrating that Prabowo is determined to foster good relations with countries like China and Russia, and to seize every opportunity to seek a path forward for Indonesia's development. On the other hand, there were also clear signs of Western-style color revolution in this recent unrest in Indonesia, so it is also possible that Prabowo was using his actions to send a silent protest to the Western forces stirring up trouble behind the scenes. In addition, by doing this, he is also sending a signal to the world, telling investors that the situation in Indonesia is now under control, which is beneficial for Indonesia to continue attracting foreign investment. And China also responded to Prabowo's sincerity this time. During the group photo, he was arranged to stand in a central position next to Putin. In contrast, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar, as the rotating chair of ASEAN, was arranged to stand in a more peripheral position. It can be said that Prabowo's performance this time was a clear choice in the China-US rivalry, and also served as a model for other countries in the global south.